Hi. So, excuse me, where do I start? So I am going to be reading chapter 14. I'm going to make a couple announcements first, and I'm not going to be staying if there's any Q&A, although I haven't gotten any Q&A during the stream lately, so I don't think this is a concern. But I'm going to read chapter 14. It's relatively short. I just want to cover a couple of things. The first one is that I got a few messages through the most recent newsletter about a couple of questions people had. I'm going to try to respond to those via email, but I am going to be doing, after the next reading on probably Wednesday, which will be chapter 15, I'm going to read one of the appendices in the back of the book and kind of talk a little bit about some of the world building stuff, and also a little bit about kind of like my process with developing the codex that exists for the book world, which I do have, and if it's of interest to people either watching the stream or watching the YouTube channel, I will upload, or not upload, but I'll show you a little bit of what the codex looks like and the program Scrivener, which I have, that I use to write my books, except for actually the first one, which I wrote entirely in a Microsoft Word document. Shane Thurston, who does all of my media like formatting for the book and also has helped with websites and other things, he was the one that got me Scrivener, and it's been a huge help. And I can talk a little bit about that if people want to watch a screen capture of some of the ways in which it works and some of the tools. I'm very rudimentary in the way that I use it, but I can try to show you some other features. So anyway, I'm going to jump into chapter 14. I'm stuck in a room that has no AC and it's hot again, so I'm going to get going and wrap it up at the end, and then I will come back on Wednesday for the next part. So, chapter 14. The journey to Dalmor was silently plagued by the inner turmoil of each of the travelers. Ghost had not spoken since Diaga confronted him during his watch, and the pall that had fallen over the former Thane kept the others quiet. Now this past laid bare, Ghost had found a new sense of himself and his purpose. He was not going to let anything stand in his way, and if anything had changed, it was only that he was more committed to his plan than he had ever been before. Revenge was the only thought that recycled over and over in his mind. Ghost eyed the riders about him distrustfully. How far could he expect them to go? Ghost was committed to his quest and willing to do anything to achieve it, but he was not sure the others could be relied upon. The Agandaic and his pet orc had that entitled sense of self-righteousness found only in those ignorant of the great inequalities of the world. The others were young and impressionable, and Ghost knew enough about himself to understand he was more a taskmaster than a honey-tongued orator. To bring the others along with him, he had to put forth proof that life was hard and brutal, and moreover that to survive meant striking back with decisive malice. It was an attitude many of those he now journeyed with were likely to reject. Trem in particular, despite what was in Ghost's eyes the weakness of his half-elven heritage, seemed important to hold on to. His companion, the younger and distinctively more human half-elf, was too green, and the orc and Logan were too righteous. Ghost needed people who were not afraid to bend the rules of morality when necessary. Vengeance was not a virtue, as Diaga had said, but Ghost had no use for virtues anymore. He was a killer at heart, and it was time to use that skill in the name of someone other than himself. Ghost's life had been about his career, his reputation, and his name. He had been a warrior, a brilliant commander when tested, but his pride had made him want to be the most famous squaw in history, and now he never would be. His ambition had been his downfall, but he knew it was also the core of what he was. The other Thanes of the Napoleon Empire had whispered that his drive would either lead to his meteoric rise or disastrous fall. Yet his father had passed the responsibility and opportunity of leading the Squaw family to him despite the risks. Everyone had believed he could be the greatest Thane of his time, but they had cautioned him not to attempt to find swifter inroads to his success. Ghost knew now they had been right. His attempt to orchestrate a more rapid ascension to legendary status had been what undercut him in the end. He was no longer a Napoleon. He was a man haunted by his failure and driven to bring punishment upon those who had assisted in his fall. At the last, with his back against the wall, he would have fought for the highest bidder, even the Nerathians, as Valissa Ulfred had done, but they had dismissed him for his betrayal. Perhaps their reasoning had been sound, but the horrors brought upon his family would have to be answered for. Ghost could still see their faces when he closed his eyes, could hear their screams at night. He himself had never been innocent, but his wife and children had been clear of sin. As a man deeply stained with his own immoral actions, he was at least capable of doing whatever was necessary to avenge them. The dark clouds in the north had moved steadily toward the party, and by now blotted out most of the sunshine. The weather was as gray as Ghost's shaggy beard, and its mood as half as foul as his own. He rode in front of the others, wrapped in his dark cloak and darker thoughts, hoping to spot Delmore before nightfall. Javanaleth rode with Logan and Grimtooth, talking softly and laughing lightly at tales from the Angadaic homeland. Behind them rode Diaga and Wrath, an odd pair, but deeply locked in an engrossing conversation, even if it was one-sided. Neep trailed solemnly behind, eyes always moving over the hills and thin woods. Genn was alone for once. The halfling had seemed nervous and edgy since he woke, and this was the longest he had been silent since the others had met him. His usefulness had been minimal thus far. Getting to Delmore was as simple as following the eastern road from Guy the Kill, but once there, the halfling's knowledge would be tested. Trem was riding rearguard, quite a deep rearguard. His thoughts were scattered. The arrival in Delmore would bring a decision he was not eager to make. If the band of travelers, loosely bound as they were, chose to take different paths, what would he do? That was his burning dilemma. Trem had a deep and indescribable need to see this thing Ghost was chasing after, a yearning that felt branded to his bones. At the same time, Javanaleth was an innocent child in Trem's eyes, with a simple and noble desire that spoke of his own past. Trem believed he was unaware of the vicious nature of the world, and that brought out the protective side of the former hermit. Both Curvin and the spirit of Garen Oakheart had each, in their own way, implored him to confront his own personal demons. Trem feared that the moment when they reached Delmore would mean more than a choice of staying or moving on, but a choice between Jobin and Ghost. Trem was snapped out of his miserable contemplation by the arrival of Diaga, shadowed as always by Neep. The young mage smiled and Trem responded in kind, though a bit half-heartedly. "We must talk, Trem," said the mage. "I fear we face great danger in Delmore." Trem matched the wizard's pace, hiding his alarm at Diaga's words. "Of course we can talk, but what makes you fear for us in Delmore?" "It is only for particular members of our company that I fear. In the case of others, I am wary of their intentions." Trem eyed Diaga sideways. "Like whom?" Diaga shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. "The man who professes to lead us, for one." "Ghost," Trem said flatly. "Indeed, he troubles me. His intent is revenge, and a bloody revenge at that. Such a vendetta is dangerous to the other members of our party and possibly those outside of it. I do not think Ghost will look out for anyone who is not necessary to the completion of his goals." "I agree, Diaga," Trem said, "but he also possesses a lead that might allow us to locate a powerful artifact capable of accomplishing great things. We cannot allow what dark Ghost holds in his heart to condemn what good his knowledge might do for us. You yourself came from the north. Don't you want to see your home liberated if it can be done?" Diaga nodded slowly. "Of course, but there is the question of how such a thing is to be accomplished. We also have to consider the more immediate danger we might be facing. You've perhaps heard of the pillaging of the eastern villages. Naturally, there were refugees in Gyla-Kill after all. Then you also know that's not a cloud darkened only with the promise of rain." Trem looked sharply at the young man. "It also carries the heavy smoke of death." Trem nearly stopped his mount, and Diaga rounded before him. "We're riding into a war, Trem. Delmore can't be far from the front of this destructive army cutting through the dust plains. That may be true, but we don't have to fight. Our task lies south, away from the town. We simply keep moving and stay alert." Diaga looked at Trem in genuine confusion. "Would you not try to help those that might be in need? I know Ghost will be single-minded in his actions, but you—" Diaga shook his head and pointed down the road. "I guess we'll find out soon enough. You see those broken carts on the hill ahead? Those are the remnants of farmers' carts from Delmore. Once we reach that rise, we're less than a mile from the town limits. What are you driving at, Diaga?" "Nothing, except that perhaps you ought to prepare yourself for what we will find once we get there." Diaga turned down the road and trotted after the others. Trem, unnerved by the exchange and his own personal fears, delayed a moment before following. His eyes strayed from the road before him to the north, where the heavy weight of the dark sky was becoming more oppressive by the minute, and he now thought he could smell the burnt wood and other matter in the air. He leaned on the neck of his horse and forced himself to keep his eyes on the path ahead. Edge emerged, limping from the pass at the base of the largest mountain he had ever seen. Looking around, he could see nothing but wind and snow. He turned back and swept his cloak about him, half walking and half lurching his way to the relative safety of the trail between the mountains. Edge shook off the heavy snow and removed his hood. "Well, we're definitely north, I just don't know how far. And I think we may have reached the end of the pass. It's all snow as far as the eye can see." It had been almost 10 days of forced marching. Their relatively light packs and the lack of new snowfall had made it easier than it might have otherwise been, but the constant movement had also slowed Edge's recovery from his leg wound. Raymer unrolled the leather parchment she had procured from her family's home. "Grandfather's map says we're about 15 days south of Mount Iceblade, going slowly, and from there we go northeast, and from there we hope to find this mysterious tower," finished Romand. "The map doesn't by chance have a location for it." Raymer shook her head. "The only thing I can tell from the map is that our family did not know what was in the northeast. That would make it the only place the tower could possibly be." Edge chuckled softly, saying, "I don't think you could go further north than Mount Iceblade. It seems so massive it must be the edge of the world." Romand laughed with him. "I can understand that. How big is this rock?" "It's well above the clouds." Edge shook his head in wonder. Raymer grabbed Edge's sleeve. "Wait, what is it?" Raymer eyed Edge nervously as she laid out her thoughts. "Well, we don't know for sure where this tower is. We only know that it's far to the north and likely northeast." Edge nodded. "And we know it's a large structure away from the mountains." Edge nodded again. Raymer shifted her feet as she got to the point. What if we climb Mount Iceblade and try to look from there? Edge and Roman's eyes widened, and they looked at each other and back at Raymer. Edge rubbed his chin thoughtfully, asking no one in particular, could we actually climb Mount Iceblade? How sheer is the rock face? I don't know, but if we climb from partway, I might be able to see the tower. Roman shrugged in half concession to the plan. Ed remained doubtful, but how far could we really see? Our eyes might not see much beyond 100 miles, but I have something that will help. The man from Hethgar smiled slyly, and he produced from his pack a strange item wrapped in a thick, soft cloth. Removing it carefully, Roman held it out for the other two to see. It was a long tube, perhaps 6 inches, with a narrow end that gradually widened to a large lens on the opposite side. He pulled on the wide end, and the device extended outward, now over a foot in length. The seafarers of Hethgar used these to spot land and other ships from a distance. It would give us a significantly longer view than our own eyes. From Iceblade it would see quite far indeed, and really it is the only reasonable course of action. We can see the mountains as we approach it. We cannot see the tower, even if we knew its location exactly. We'll easily find our way to the mountain, ensuring we don't get lost, and that gives us a chance to get our bearings. Edge looked from Roman to Raymer, and then back to Roman. Finally he looked at Raymer again for a long time. Can you make it? Raymer punched him lightly. You dumb ox. Of course I can make it. It's you we should be worried about. Ed grabbed her hand. I'm serious, Raymer. I've been here before. It's dangerous enough with a storm brewing, let alone gusting. Raymer glared at him in steadfast defiance. I've lived my whole life in the shadow of the great northern waste. I know you plan to leave me behind in Glaciar. Raymer silenced Edge's protestations with a sharp look. And you're a fool to think I'd have allowed that. Besides, now there's nowhere for me to go. I'm a daughter of Nepal, and I would be willing to bet I know the dangers of this region better than either of you. She's right, my friend, Roman said confidently. We need her more than she needs us. Edge sighed and then held up his hand in acceptance. All right. He wrapped his arms around the shoulders of his companions. Let's go to the mountain, all of us. The three pulled their furs and thinner apparel about themselves as tightly as they could and stepped from the mouth of the mountain trail into the blizzard. Raymer squinted as the wind blew her hair back. Edge threw a hand in front of his face, and they walked northward together, Raymer's arm in his. Roman pulled his hood lower and moved to follow. Before long, the hidden opening in the rock was covered in snow, and the footprints of the three adventurers were falling into newly forming drifts. Raymer squinted at Edge, calling over the wind. They call this place the Bull of Storms. The wind is constant, and the snow is ever present. Roman grunted as he forged ahead. Lucky for us. A few hours later, a shadow came across the pile of snow that hid the opening to the pass between the western waste and Glaciar. Stepping through a strange rift was the heavily cloaked Saltillian, clinging to his staff, its runes glowing brightly with magic. He gripped his portal stone tightly in his left hand, leaning on the dimming staff with his right. Releasing his grip on the gem, snapped the portal shut, and Saltillian lowered himself to the ground, sitting solemnly in the snow. He tucked the gem into his robes and relaxed his body. They had been here, but where did they go now? There were no towns in this region. They had nowhere to run. Perhaps they would die from the cold or hunger before they got to shelter. Perhaps he ought to abandon his pursuit. No, he cast the possibility out of his mind. Saltillian could not take the chance. He wanted Raymer back. She was his, and he felt a growing urgency to kill the upstart lost elf. Saltillian would rip his eyes out with his bare hands, make him suffer in front of her. Saltillian would show Raymer where the real strength lay. The wizard had kept a lot of artifacts, ones that Daervron had no use for, or did not understand, but Saltillian had the advantage of being from this land and time. Thus some of the newer items made more sense to him. The portal stone had been tossed aside by Daervron as an unnecessary trinket. Saltillian's other artifact was the medallion he wore around his neck. This particular item was not a scrap thrown him by Daervron. Saltillian had found it depicted in an illustration in the strange book he now kept pressed close to his body. Amid the storage rooms off of Nepal City Castle's library, he had stumbled upon it and been drawn to remove it for himself. The medallion was quite old, but shone with an unearthly sheen as if the metal were freshly polished. He pulled the wolf's head from beneath his robes where it had rested heavily against his chest since he left the inn and stared at it. The beast had red eyes and a snarling face full of fangs. Saltillian met the gaze of the red orbs and his head swirled. He forced himself to focus and the medallion sucked him in. He sought the wolves running on the cold grounds of the land about him, but they turned away, refusing to serve him. Saltillian raged and they fled his anger as he delved deeper, beneath the snow and ice. Suddenly he reared up out of his sitting position as something larger and far older than any wolf extended contact back towards him. Saltillian was held in a place, riveted by that power. A dark language of rumbling menace snarled in his head. Human? Saltillian fought for control. Help me. Karak helps no mortal, only himself. Saltillian steadied his mind, and he lashed back at the creature. You will help me. Saltillian felt the thing lurch in pain and unspeakable anger, then it subsided. Saltillian was not in control, but he was no longer being assaulted. He tried to communicate again. I have prey for you, here, in the waste. The resistance weakened further, but did not disappear. Where? Saltillian smiled, knowing he'd succeeded in baiting his quarry. Come to me. The creature barked savagely in Saltillian's mind. I will come. The connection was broken. Saltillian fell back in the snow, still smiling. His already worn mind was fraying even further, but of course he did not notice. The mage was not even aware his hand strayed to the book, brushing softly over the binding. He'd find Raymir and make the other two scream for mercy. She would be able to resist the might of the newfound. She would not be able to resist the might of the newfound forces he had called to his aid. Saltillion, with great effort, sat up and waited for Karak to arrive. Varasho Hawking walked from the hospital tent to the wash basin outside. He paused as he was about to dip his hands in when he realized the water was already a deep red. The field surgeon walked out of the tent and replaced the bowl with a fresh one, pouring the contents of the old bowl onto the grass and handing it to a servant. Varasho began washing his hands and whispered, "Thank you, Nemil." The surgeon eyed his lord askance. "Don't thank me, Varasho. I should thank you. Every pair of hands helps. Without the priest, we have to tend every wounded man here, and too many are dying that could have lived." Nemil glanced at Varasho and inquired nervously, "Where are the faithful healers of Paladinus?" Varasho wiped his hands on his tunic and sighed. "My father has ordered their appearance at the front. Hladic has stalled." Nemil grabbed Varasho's wrist. "He cannot be allowed to. Damn it, Varasho, I'm proud of my trade, but I'm used to minor wounds or working when the priests have worn out their powers. I'm not capable of caring for this many men. I can't watch as many people die under my care." Varasho turned to his companion and placed his hand on his shoulder. "Nemil, I cannot change what's beyond my control. You're doing everything you can, and all I can ask is that you have to keep helping my men, at least until I find a better solution." Nemil pushed his hand away and turned back to the tent. "Of course I'm willing. I will keep helping them. I'm a blasted doctor." Nemil turned back to Varasho and pressed his finger against his chest, speaking sternly. "But don't think I'll forget this. That High Lord should hang for letting people die when they could have lived." Nemil turned and shrugged his skinny, shirtless shoulders as he went back to the tent. Varasho sighed and bent to retrieve his tunic from the foot of the basin's pillar. They were camped several miles from the Pillars of Light, less than a day's ride from the twin towns of Barrow and Dunigan, and a few days' march further from Alderlast. Varasho had returned to help Nemil and his companions, stitching up warriors who'd survived the attack on the vile fortress. Nemil was a good man who'd served the kingdom well. Too squeamish to be on a battlefield, he overcame his fear of blood when he knew his actions could help people. The result was his own inventive form of military medicine. Many had called him a blasphemer or faithless citizen of Angladeus. Nemil had chosen the practical path of science and experimentation to supplement the powers of zeal and loyalty. It had been to augment and support the priesthood and their magical methods of healing the injured, but he'd upset many. The Angladaics are people whose national identity is so closely tied to their god that any alternative to his immortal gifts is, to his most passionate followers, seen as an affront to their culture. But several High Lords had vouched for Nemil and others like him. Now their support of his art had saved many lives, though his anger in the absence of the faith-empowered healers was justified. Varasho pulled his shirt over his head and paused, sensing others moving about him. Men had entered the dark clearing between the camp tents. Varasho instinctively reached for his staff and remembered he'd left it in his own temporary quarters along with his armor. There were 5 of them, armored in heavy mail and wearing red cloaks. Varasho watched one of them approach with the sword drawn, recognizing the charging boar symbol of Wemer on his armor, and tensed for a fight. What's the meaning of this? The lead soldier kept coming forward slowly, then stopped just out of arm's reach, saying evenly, "I was ordered by High Lord Wemer, who took orders from High Lord Vendile, to kill you." Varasho stumbled a bit, but recovered himself. He took a step forward and lifted his chin to his would-be assailant. "You're here to kill me. My father will not sit idle if he learns I've been murdered. Your father is no longer in a position to help you or anyone else." Varasho swallowed but refused to back down. "Were you sent to kill him too?" "No, he's imprisoned." "Who would dare?" The soldier chuckled. "Who but High Lord Vendile, the same man who demanded your death?" Varasho's shoulders slumped and he half turned away, his mind working swiftly on how best to catch the 5 off guard. But he was distracted by the news his father was now in prison. Varasho had predicted this, but of course his law-abiding father would never have struck first. Now his son, his only hope, was trapped far from the capital. Varasho considered calling for Nemil, but that would only result in another innocent life being taken. He eyed his adversary. "If you intend to kill me, then at least show me your face, unless you're afraid to have me know you." The soldier removed his helm, showing short black hair and hard, unshaven features. He was a rough-looking man, a soldier by profession with a grim eye. To Varasho's surprise, he then knelt, holding his sword up to the prince. "My lord, I was sent here to kill you by a man who is too cowardly to do it himself. I'll not commit murder any more than I will be party to an unlawful usurpation of the throne. I came here to find you and bring you to Alderlast. Allies await us at the home of your father." Varasho stared awestruck at the kneeling soldier, then gestured quickly for him to stand. "Allies." The man rose and sheathed his sword. "As much as I would like to, my lord, I cannot free your father alone, and neither can you. Your father's men can tell you better what they plan to do, and who has come to our aid." Varasho stepped close to the guard, doing his best to hide his growing respect for the man. "Who are you that would defy a High Lord and a newly named king for a marked man?" "They call me Renan Ordland, sir, and the way my men and I see it, the only marked man is my master." Renan paused in consideration before adding, "and that snake, Vendile." Varasho grasped Renan's forearm firmly and pulled him in. "This will not be forgotten, Renan." The guard returned the grip. I asked for nothing but the right to serve a king I believe in. Then let's go get that king, together. Renan nodded and motioned to one of his guards. I had your armor and weapons brought from your tent, and we fetched you a fresh horse. Renan pulled his own mount close and heaved himself into the saddle. If we leave now, we could reach Elderlass before dawn, riding hard. Varasho nodded and pulled on his armor. We'll have to be careful. Vendai will have guards on watch. Renan shook his head. He's keeping the succession a secret until his public crowning tomorrow afternoon. The guard won't change until then, but we expect the city will be locked down afterward, so we cannot be opposed by any outside protest. You have to get into Elderlass tonight. Then my father's house is also unguarded, Varasho asked as he pulled himself into the saddle. Nothing can appear out of the ordinary until Vendai wears the crown, Renan assured him. Varasho wheeled his horse and snapped the reins. Then let's ensure him a short and unhappy rule. Varasho tore out of the camp, followed by the 5 killers turned saviors. As he galloped into the darkness, he grew angrier and angrier. That Vendai would actually order the imprisonment of his father appalled Varasho. As a child, he'd fallen in love with the ideals of the Angudaic society, only to learn as he grew up those ideals were just that to most people. His father had dared to fight for his beliefs, and had put his people and himself in a dire predicament. Varasho was determined to rectify the mistakes of his father, and punish the foolishness of his enemies. Alright, so that's chapter 14. After chapter 15, on Wednesday, ideally, I'm going to go into one of the appendices, and what I'm probably going to do is do the appendice on the Napoleon Empire, because the context of what Nepal is and how its society works impacts a few of the characters that we've met at this point. It's got Ghost, obviously, and Raymir, both of whom are Napoleon by birth. Diaga, who's also Napoleon, though he was an orphan and left the country to become a mage. And then you've got the invading forces led by Wolfbane, and they are all in Nepal trying to reform it into what he wants it to be. So the sort of backdrop for a lot of the characters is this culture of Nepal, which is based on a lot of things that I researched related to actual historical places. So I thought it would be interesting to talk about as a follow-up to chapter 15, since we'll be hitting the halfway point. And then probably a little later on, maybe around chapter 20, I'll do the section that's on Angudais and goes into a little more detail about the formation laws that impact that country, because we'll spend more time there too. So, as always, you can follow me at Twitter, or on Twitter at legacychronicle.com. On Twitter at legacychronicle. You can also email me, trevorhpaul@gmail.com. You can send messages through Twitch. I know I've been saying at the end of these videos that I'm going to put the chapters up on YouTube. That actually is happening as soon as I shut this one down. I've already got it set up and ready to go. So the chapters through chapter 14 will now be available on the YouTube channel, and I will link that through Twitter and on the Facebook page. Thanks for watching.